I walk into my school's lobby where my friends and I always hang out in the mornings before class. The four of them are in deep conversation, and I try to join them without being noticed, but that doesn't happen. As they each greet me when I walk over to them, I watch their eyes move to the mark on my jaw where Mike had punched me. They all look like they really want to ask me about this, but as soon as they notice my bruise, they also notice the hurt and angry look on my face that I unfortunately wear quite often when I get to school. So, they go back to their conversation and try to avoid looking at my bruise, which I'm grateful for. My friends know better than to press me for details right after I get beat up. Being the kid in school with the recently deceased father, I'm not exactly Mr. Popular. Even before my dad died, I didn't have a ton of close friends, but I got along well with enough people so that I was never alone at school. But then, like almost everyone in school, all the kids I used to hang out with started avoiding me a few weeks after my father died. I assumed this was because they were afraid that if they talked to me, then they would somehow upset me. So, rather than risk upsetting me, they chose to ignore me. Luckily for me, not everyone in school decided that ignoring the kid who was obviously going through a tough time was the smartest decision. Ty, Jake, Chris, and Luke were all guys who I've been in the same classes with since the 8th grade, but had never really become good friends with them. This was mainly because the four of them were usually happy to just keep to themselves and talk about the latest blockbuster movies or anticipated video game releases. After the few weeks where everyone was treating me like an injured puppy had passed, I felt so awkward and out of place with everyone I used to hang out with that I was ending up just eating lunch by myself every day. However, when he saw that I was sitting by myself, Ty had walked over and asked if I wanted to join the four of them. His invitation actually sounded genuine and not like he was only inviting me over because he felt bad for me. I accepted his offer, and although most of the time I only stand or sit with them quietly as they talk amongst themselves, I'm still truly grateful for the friendship. As my friends continue their conversation, I put my earphones back in and tune them out. I try to forget my bus ride and run in with Mike by looking around the lobby at all the faces of people who I see every day, but barely speak to. There are several different groups of kids in our school. First, there are the smokers and druggies, who are the kids that get terrible marks in school, always smell like cigarettes, and either show up to class late or leave early because they're outside smoking. These are also the same kids who go on my bus and always have Mike's back instead of mine whenever we fight. Then there are the overachievers, who are the kids that always get the highest marks in school and are in a ton of extracurricular activities. These kids will have a panic attack if they get anything below a 95% on a test because they think that'll ruin their chance of getting into a good university. There's also my least favorite group, the popular crowd, which is made up of all the hot, skinny girls and some of the athletic guys in our school. I dislike this group so much because they only care about themselves. They'll never talk to anyone who they aren't already friends with, and they won't hesitate to embarrass other people if it means making themselves look better. Finally, the last group are the outsiders, as I call them. They are the loud and flamboyant kids at school who dress weirdly and are constantly talking about their ever-changing sexualities. I've only ever spoken to a few people from this group, but the people I talked to seemed really nice. I just think they're a bit out there. I check the time on my phone and see that first period is about to start. My friends also realize the time, so we say goodbye to each other before heading our separate ways towards our lockers. First period, I have gym, which is a class that I usually don't mind, except today, we're playing basketball. I can't say I'm a big fan of basketball, mainly because I'm short, white, and terrible at shooting. So today, I mainly just stand around waiting for a pass that thankfully doesn't come, and occasionally chatting with a person on the other team. Once first period ends, I head over to my English class. My English teacher is a huge Shakespeare fan, so we ended up spending a lot of the semester reading and learning about Shakespeare's different plays. Considering that we started reading them in February and it is now the end of May, paints a pretty good picture of all the fun we've had in class this year. In case you can't tell, Shakespeare is not one of my favorite writers. I have nothing against the guy. My only problem is that his plays were written like 150 years ago. People spoke a lot differently back then, so nobody in my class ever has any idea what's happening in the plays. My teacher has to constantly stop and explain what's going on or what a word means so that we can barely grasp the plot. If the plays we've read have been translated to modern day English, then I might actually enjoy Shakespeare. After an hour and 15 minutes of reading and writing about a play that I barely understand, English class ends and I walk over to the cafeteria to eat lunch. I sit down with my friends at our usual table and take out the sandwich that my mom had packed for me this morning. My friends could probably sense that I'm in a better mood than I was this morning because they don't hesitate to ask me about the bruise on my jaw. Ty looks over at me and asks, So, what the hell happened this morning? Luke, Jake, and Chris perk up when they hear the very question that they're all dying to know the answer to. I swallow a bite of my sandwich, look up innocently, and say, "This morning? Well, let's see. I got up around 7 and went to the shower. Then, and here's where it gets really exciting, I ate breakfast. After that, he means what happened on the bus, smartass," Chris says to me as all 4 of them roll their eyes. I finish the rest of my sandwich and chew the last bite slowly, trying to pause for dramatic effect. I swallow, clear my throat, and then turn to look at them. It's not as exciting as you would think. After I got on the bus this morning, Mike tripped me. When I managed to take my seat behind him, I called him a dumbass, which pissed him off enough for him to punch me in the jaw. I shrug. That about sums it up. They all stare at me in stunned silence. I can't figure out if they're amazed at how awesomely brave and badass I was, or if they thought I was just an idiot. Apparently, it's the latter, because after a long silence, Luke says, "You do know that Mike is like the biggest and most unstable kid at school, and you're, well, you." I just shrug, because that's something I'm already well aware of. Jake shakes his head in disapproval and says, "Look, man, I know it has to be hard getting bullied like that every day by Mike, but you have to learn to let those things go and ignore him. If you keep reacting the way you are, then he wins." A part of me knows that he's right. However, I am not the type of person who is able to just swallow their pride and let something go. Regardless, since I just want this conversation to end, I nod and say, "Alright man, I'll try that." Jake seems satisfied with this answer. Good. I look up at the clock in the cafeteria and see that there are only 5 minutes left of lunch. So we all stand up and start walking to our lockers to get our books for the last 2 periods. As we walk down the hall, Ty pulls me aside and says, "By the way, dude, even though I'm sorry you got punched in the face, it was pretty badass how you stood up to Mike. That dude really is such an asshole." Then he smiles and raises his hand for a high five. I just look at him confused for a few seconds before being unable to stop myself from smiling back. It was kind of nice to hear that at least somebody thought I was badass. I slap his hand. For 3rd period, Ty and I are in the same French class, so we walk upstairs to the classroom together. French class is always one of the highlights of my day, but that had nothing to do with my enjoyment of the French language. Ty and I walk into class a bit later than usual, so every desk in the room is occupied except for 2 on opposite sides of the classroom. The first open desk is beside a dark-haired girl named Jill, who I knew Ty had a major crush on, and the other is beside the reason why I like French class so much. A cute brunette named Tessa. Tessa Walker is one of the nicest people I've had the pleasure of meeting because she's always kind, friendly, and constantly puts other people first. However, the reason why I like her so much is because she isn't like the other girls in school, as cliche as that sounds. All the popular girls at my school starve themselves to look thin and spend a bunch of time and effort on how they look and what they wear. Then they go out on weekends and get hammered with a bunch of guys who treat them like garbage because, for some reason, this makes them feel good about themselves. Tessa is different. She always looks beautiful not because she tries so hard, but because she is beautiful. And she doesn't need to go out and get drunk with a bunch of asshole guys in order for her to feel good about herself either. She's also one of the few people outside of my group of friends who will always talk to me. Sure, like everyone else, she did feel really bad for me for the first few weeks after my dad died. But unlike everyone else, she continued to talk to me instead of ignoring me. Every time she sees me in the hallway, she asks me how I'm doing or how my day is going, which is probably the main reason why she's one of my favorite people. As Ty and I awkwardly stand in the classroom doorway, trying to decide where to sit, he nudges my arm and whispers, "Hey man, do you mind if I take that seat in the back?" I shrug, trying to act nonchalant. "All yours, dude." While he walks over to the empty desk beside Jill, I take a seat next to Tessa. She looks at me with her beautiful brown eyes, and I suddenly find myself becoming even more nervous than when I faced Mike this morning. Tessa smiles at me.
Hi.
I give her a friendly smile back. Hey. Tessa leans back in her chair, and the sudden movement causes it to let out a loud squeak. Most of the class just ignores the noise, but the 2 girls sitting at the desks right behind us start giggling at her. Even though Tessa was paying them no minds, I get annoyed at these girls, because it seems that most of the popular girls at the school love to make Tessa the butt of their jokes. As I said, Tessa is easily the nicest person who walks the halls of this school. However, for the idiotic reason that she isn't as skinny as most of the popular girls that she hangs out with, they love to make fun of her behind her back. I hear their constant teasing and backhanded compliments as I walk through the school, but I never do anything about it because I'm scared of anyone discovering how much I like Tessa. I figured that if people find out that I like her, they'll probably force her to go on a date with me and make me feel like a sympathy case, which is the last thing I want. That's why I usually try my best to keep my distance and not talk to her as often as I'd like. I attempt to ignore the pair of giggling airheads sitting behind us by focusing on the French teacher, who walks up to the front of the class. He begins talking about the different types of French verbs and how to conjugate them, and I immediately feel my eyes glazing over. My mom has been after me about getting my French mark up, but this class is so utterly boring that I always struggle to pay attention. About halfway through class, Tessa leans over and whispers to me,
So, how'd you get the bruise on your jaw?
I don't want to tell her about how I got punched in the face this morning. Luckily, I'm able to make up the world's most convincing lie. Stairs? I say, sounding a bit confused.
Stairs?
She asks. Yeah, I fell going up the stairs. She raises her eyebrows, looking surprised.
Where? Here at school?
Sure,
Well, that makes sense. Millions of people are killed every year from walking up the stairs.
she says sarcastically. I grin. Oh, I'm not surprised. I barely escaped with my life. She returns my smile.
And don't even get me started on escalators.
We both start laughing so loudly that the teacher stops talking mid-sentence and looks over at us with his eyebrows raised, clearly annoyed. We manage to stop laughing. So he goes back to talking about a small project that we would be starting today and working on for the rest of the week. He also mentions that we'll be working in partners, and I immediately get excited. As I attempt to work up the nerve to ask Tessa to be partners, she beats me to it.
Do you want to be my partner?
I try not to sound too excited when I quickly say, yeah, that sounds awesome. Then I realize that sounded way too enthusiastic, so I quickly add, I mean, if you want to. She smiles and nods. I turn to look back at Ty to make sure that he doesn't want to be partners since he's basically the only person I know in this class. However, he had already started talking to Jill about what they were going to do their project on. What a nerd. Our teacher begins walking around the classroom handing out sheets for the project and assigning each group laptops to use to research their chosen topic. Tessa and I are the last ones to get our sheet, and I expect him to assign us a laptop to use too. Instead, he says to us in French, I apologize, but we don't have enough laptops for everyone. Since you two like to talk during class so much, I figured you could do your research in the computer room next door. After hearing that comment, we awkwardly leave the classroom and walk into the computer room. The computer room is called a room and not a lab because it's about the size of a very small classroom. The room only has 6 computers sitting on top of a long table and an old printer tucked away in the corner. Nobody likes working in the computer room because of how cramped it is, but since I'm working with Tessa, I don't mind. After we walk into the room, Tessa sits down in front of one of the monitors and turns it on. I'm about to shut the door when I realize people would probably start to get the wrong idea, so I leave it open. I then sit down at the computer next to Tessa's. We're facing the door with our backs to the wall so that we'll be able to easily see if the teacher walks in. Tessa sets the sheet down on the desk in between us and says,
So we need to pick an endangered animal and then do research on it. Any ideas on what animal we should do?
I don't know. I reply. I have a dog that I know a little bit about, but I don't think we can do a project on him. She smiles.
No, probably not. What about orcas?
No, I don't have any orcas.
I mean, do you want to do the project on orcas?
She says while chuckling. Yeah, sure, we can do that. We spend the rest of class doing research on orcas. Tessa does most of the research while I put the information into a slideshow and try to make her laugh by telling stupid jokes. This is easily one of the best classes I've had this year. That is, until I look out the open door into the classroom directly across from us to see Mike staring at us. When he sees me looking, he grins. Crap. The one thing I've been trying to avoid for so long is Mike finding out that I like Tessa. He definitely just saw us together, and even if he doesn't know for sure that I like her, he won't hesitate to tell other people that I do. Then once other people start to find out, the news will eventually get back to Tessa. Tessa notices my troubled expression and asks,
What's wrong?
Nothing. I respond, but she can easily tell I'm lying. She sees that I'm looking across the hall at Mike, so she asks,
Who's he?
Tessa looks away from Mike and stares at the bruise on my jaw. I can tell that she is already putting the pieces together. I need to change the subject before she fully figures things out. Nobody. I lie. Hey, there's only a few minutes left of class. How about we head back? She looks at me with concern, but says,
Yeah, sure.
After double checking that our work is saved, we turn off our computers and collect our books. As we walk out of the computer room, I try to avoid looking at Mike, but I can feel his cold stare on the back of my head. Hello everyone, and thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this chapter, then please remember to leave a like on the video and subscribe to my channel. New episodes of Strength drop on Tuesdays and Fridays, but if you'd like to see the chapters early and support the channel for only $5 a month, then head on over to my Patreon page, link is in the description, where the first 5 chapters of Strength are already posted. Also, you can purchase the full paperback novel on my website if you're in Canada, or on Amazon if you live outside of Canada. Thanks again, and I'll be back in a few days with the next episode.